Smart 24, driving business.
Well, good evening and many thanks for joining us yet again. This is The Point and you're watching Smart 24 Television. I'm Jerome Paul Sonko and today we have a very huge discussion if you're to ask me. But of course, like we've been doing in our daily broadcast lately, is we are looking at the budget, the post-budget breakdown in relation to what we are having for the financial year 2023-2024. And of course, the financial year will be kicking off 1st July. This very year and will be coming to the end 2024 30th June. But besides that, we have a 52.7 trillion budget that is ahead of us, budget that is that was presented last week by the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development to the Ugandans in regards to what the disbursements are and the various allocations in what is a program-based budget. Our conversations today will be strictly analyzing the economy, but further looking at the priorities for the next financial year. And with me, I have two guests who are going to be helping us break this down. And at my immediate left is Dr. Clark Chisembo, who is joining us once again to break this down. Good evening, Doctor. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
Well, and at my extreme left, I do have Mr. Francis Chisirinya, who is the Chief Membership Officer at the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda. Good evening, and many thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening, and good evening, viewers.
Well, I think there we have it. Our conversations will definitely kick off as we dig deeper in the 52.7 trillion budget. Well, the first question to many of the Ugandans was, is this a pro-people budget? And I would definitely want to understand all the policymakers behind the budget do make a budget to make sure that it fits into the needs of the Ugandans, or it does satisfy the local person, that is even those from the grassroots. And speaking of which, we will at least try to understand what is normally considered while choosing these priorities. I'll start with Dr. Clark Chisembo. When you come to think of it first, is we have priorities in our national budget.
Yeah.
And these priorities normally take the lion's share of the budget, regardless of the fact that we still have more of the other, allocations going elsewhere. But what is normally considered during, the discussions, the paperwork that is done before Ugandans fully appreciate what is presented?
So, thank you so much. And I'll start it from the bottom, the core.
Okay.
When you're creating or developing a budget, a national budget for a fiscal year, the first instance and thought that comes to mind and that informs whoever is participating in this process is what we call in the financial economics the fiscal and monetary policy, right?
Okay.
So you have to understand the prevailing cost and availability of money in a nation, in the region, and globally. That is when you're talking about the fiscal policy. When it comes to the monetary policy,
okay,
you're looking at the macroeconomics. Now that's where you're going to find all the different sectors that the government is responsible for in partnership with the different collaborators and partners, and try to see that what is the demand for the money we talked about, what is the supply, and what are the interest rates to be able to get this money. That is the starting point. Then now from that point, you come down to the different sectors. And when you look at the different sectors, there are definitely those which are priority, whether you want it or not. For example, you need a healthy nation which is productive to be able to work and offer their labor for money. But you need a thriving economy. So you'll need, say, the private sector engagement. So you come down and ask yourself, but how does the private sector get engaged, for example, unless if there is other mechanisms of development which drive you to industrializations? You need to mechanize. You need the whole aspect of validation. Then you're like, which are the core, where do you have competitive advantage in this, say, region of East Africa and maybe Africa? In the meantime, you're thinking in the line of trade, both national trade and the transboundary regional trade.
Yes.
And in your mind, you're thinking, where do I hold a comparative advantage?
Okay.
Now that starts informing the budgetary process, because you're going to need money to be able to finance all the different programs that you're going to lay out there. So first think of generating that money and look at the cost of generating it. They now start engaging stakeholders when already you have a benchmark or a blueprint on which you're benchmarking.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Francis Chisirinya, when you look at our economy now, generally, last year, by the time the budget was presented, Uganda's inflation was shooting up to around 6.9%, according to figures from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics by then. And now, as we look back here, the inflation is actually dropping to around 6.2 currently. When you look at our performance generally, before we even dive into the national budget and the breakdown of the priorities, how have we performed as a country, in relation to what the state of the nation was last year?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Sonko.
Okay.
When you look at how we performed relative end of June relative to end of June last year,
yes,
the 12-month period, you put it very clearly that we read last year's budget was read during a time of increasing prices, mainly due to the challenges that we're facing in Ukraine.
Yes.
We were seeing a lot of uncertainties that were affecting the business community. You can imagine they were just coming out of COVID, then all of a sudden there's Ukraine. As companies were trying to establish themselves, all of these particular problems. Now, that is why that budget was actually focused very much on supporting the recovery of the economy from the effects of COVID, but also on the issues that came through the Ukraine war. So we are happy now that where we are, the biggest pointer, actually around 3 major pointers to the state of the economy are showing progress since. The first one, you indicated it. Inflation at some stage was at 10.7%. Actually, that was about October 2022. But now we are at about 6.2%, which is a good progress. It's not there yet because our target is about 5% or below, but it is good progress.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing was in terms of what we call GDP growth, the volume of economic activities in the country, which is an important indicator, ladies and gentlemen. What it means is that the things we do in the country, the economic activities, the goods we produce and sell, the services we offer and are paid, So if you look at it from your own perspective as a business person, it tells you something. For instance, if you have been unable to grow your sales as a business, there are implications already. It means either you are being outcompeted, your products are becoming not maybe favorites anymore, okay? And chances are that you might fail to meet some of your obligations. So failing to increase the volume of your activities in your business is a danger. So even from a government perspective, failing for the country's economy, the entire thing, to generate increased economic activities is really a disaster. And in some countries like Europe, America, governments fall because economic activities have slumped, things they call a recession. It means I'm no longer able to manage the kind of things that I used to manage before. Perhaps even my cost of living is deteriorating, and the people in developed economies, in some economies, don't want this at all. So they really show this in the way they really do their governance. So from a government perspective, it is so crucial. So this year we saw our GDP, the rise in economic activities, it went up to about 5.5%. This was up from 4.4% of last year. So it demonstrates some progress given the challenges that we're having. Now, the second thing that we saw, the third thing that we saw is that how was government financing its budget? What kind of deficit was it having? Was it generating all the money that it needed to fund its obligations, provide services, provide security, buy goods, and do all of these things based on the plans that they have? So that by the end of last year, what was called the deficit, that is in terms of financing, was about 7%. It means 7% of GDP, it means that there was a gap which we could not finance by our own money, if you compare it to GDP. So you had to go back, you had to go to the markets, raise money, borrow everywhere. But this time around, this is going to reduce by 5.1%, which is good progress. The debts are big, but we are borrowing at a reduced rate, which is from a direction perspective a good thing. So then what about in terms of the private sector? Because you remember the private sector is reading all these particular indications.
Yes.
Okay. So if it is seeing increased economic activities, if the economic activities within the economy and your business is moving in tandem or is moving ahead of the economy, it means it is pointing to you to invest more, buy more stock, because you now have more buyers. So how do businesses finance this? So what indicates this is mainly what we call private sector borrowing. So the money people go and get from the banks to finance their business. So we are seeing commercial bank lending increasing during the year. And I think this is also a very good thing because it emphasizes the issue that we are together as an economy. We are building up activities. We are becoming better than what we were last year. I'm not saying that every business or every person is going to be feeling like he's okay. No, it is not okay because we started counting this from a very low end. Because COVID hit us, then Ukraine were very much at a very low end. So it's like rising out of a hole. So you can, at some stage, you say, oh, I can now see the light. Then you continue and say, I can now touch the top. So, but doesn't mean that you're okay. So I'm not saying that you are very okay, but from the direction perspective, I think we are moving in the correct direction.
Well, indeed, and for the viewers out there, you get to realize we are feeding into the conversation currently, trying to break down the priorities first of the national budget for the financial year 2023-2024. Of course, we were having a background of where all this is coming from before we dive into the bigger picture. And after the break, we return with conversations rotating around our priorities for the next financial year. Were we spot on this time round? And of course, what do we intend to achieve in the next financial year? The main goal is to at least ensure that Ugandans get into the money economy, and also to comfortably say that the economy is recovering to pre-pandemic levels or even beyond. Well, this is the point where we analyze economic policies, and we return shortly after the break to discuss more among us the other details.